Alright, whole lot's happened since my last video. I feel like I've laid the foundation on the basics of where my thought process lies and why. Uh, Perhaps maybe not hit on every minute detail or every perceivable argument that there could be or stance or position, but over time I'm sure you'll kind of be able to have a good gauge as to where that would go, as to, you know, the basics of my line of thinking. So today I really want to do a little bit of opinion on current events. Uh, so let's just get right into it. First, we got New Zealand and the gun grab because of the tragedy that happened over there. I commented on it. I even had to do a correction on it. Note that I don't have a press pass and I'm not trying to slander anybody. So I did feel it was important to correct that as the story was unfolding. The first video I had that commented on it, it had just been coming out. I hadn't had time to really look into it. So when I got more information, I did quickly correct that mistake I had made on there. So I will try to be you know uh, consistent on trying to keep up with certain aspects that are corrections, but that there's a difference between correcting the facts and having a disagreement of opinions. So the response to the horrible tragedy is to start banning the guns in New Zealand, apparently, and you know that's their country, and that's they can do what they want to do. U.S. has no jurisdiction over what their prime minister and legislators decide to implement over there. They were voted in for whatever reason. So now they're dealing with that. The argument for that being a bad idea is abundant. I mean, here's the thing about laws. Laws are voluntary. That's why people can break them. You know, you can follow laws and live within the guidelines that we have voted on, agreed on, passed through the legislative branch, and been signed in by the executive branch, and has been confirmed to be constitutional by the judicial branch, and followed the layout of how our government operates for the social structure of a civil society. And if you don't, there are penalties that have been agreed upon that are in the law books that have people that study those and debate those. And, that's what we have legislators for, to amend, alter, change, repeal, things like that. When it comes to the Second Amendment, this is pretty important. And we've talked about this a little bit, or I've talked about this a little bit on these videos. Um, New Zealand doesn't have anything like the Second Amendment. And the difference here and there is like night and day. So, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, because it hasn't worked out great in other places. And a lot of people want to quote Australia, but it really didn't work out great there, and it's not a good comparison to our country. Well, with the island nation of Australia, um, a lot of the statistics showed that it was on the decline before the gun buyback, and it didn't help. Actually, crime increased, which is a predictable outcome that most people that are on the side of the Second Amendment here are going to point out. When you legislate something, you're not fixing the problem. The only person that you're fixing the problem of are the ones that are going to follow the law in the first place. And this guy who committed this heinous act against people that were going to worship in their faith, it doesn't matter what your faith is. In this instance, it happened to be a mosque, and there's been mention of what his goals were was specifically to cause division, especially here, and that's the relation to New Zealand and America concerning that crazy person. But the legislators are saying, go after the guns to prevent people from being able to do acts like this. But there have been plenty of instances where Other things were used, like knives, like cars, and you can't ban everything. Um, people have been. If you believe in the Bible, you will know that people have been killing each other since Cain and Abel, and they were using rocks. So, if somebody has the intent and the will to do something, they will find a way to do it, whether it is for evil or good. But it doesn't make sense to punish the people that are doing good and following the laws and taking away their privileges because of a bad actor. It makes more sense to blame the person that committed the heinous act and try to figure out how to maybe identify those red flags of the person better. Uh, in a sense that maintains freedom and privacy. So I don't think that's going to work out well in New Zealand. Like I said, England's cracked down on guns a lot. They even started cracking down on knives, and that's still not working too great either. But in the context of America, it's a constitutional right, and it is difficult to change a constitutional right. Um, there are two ways to do this. One is the constitutional way, where it will have to be ratified by three-fourths of the states. Um, that means the civilians will have to agree to hand over that right in order for it to be amended in the Constitution. It was made to be difficult deliberately, it was an intentional thing. The second way is to be complacent with government overreach until we get into a totalitarian state where they can overlook and overstep the people so much that they can just start changing the Constitution, which would be a hindrance to the freedom of the country and the people in it. So, freedoms come with dangers. You can't have uh, freedom without a sense of risk, that there are going to be people, bad actors, that are not going to follow with the general notion of society. There have always been bad people, there will always be bad people, and they do bad things. We have so many documentaries out there, especially on Netflix lately, about just people doing heinous acts. I mean, there was recently the Bundy tapes, which was interesting. I did watch that one. Uh, talk about Ted Bundy and his multi-state cross-country murder spree. Uh, you've had Jeffrey Dahmers, and you've had Ed Geins, and you've had Charles Mansons, and the list goes on and on. Zodiac, Son of Sam, BTK, Green River Killer. You know, it. We recognize those people as the bad actors, and use their profiles and investigated how they thought, why they thought that, what were some things that had some commonality between many people, and it's still a developing science in criminology today, especially criminal psychology. But you attack the problem in an intellectual way. You don't prohibit people with an emotional reaction, which is exactly what New Zealand did, and then they're trying to tie it to Trump in any way they can to make him out to look bad. And that's going to bring me into the next couple of things. It was a pretty good week for the president this week. The Mueller report, no collusion. After 20 months, almost 2 years, what was it? It's like 20 or 22 months, something like that. All we heard from all of these news outlets, the big network newses, was that Fox is stupid and unreliable, and there's Russian collusion. There's proof, 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 there's proof. Undeniable, there will be indictments. The noose is tightening around the neck. The walls are closing in. It's likely that we will see people go to jail. People are getting scared. He's being frantic. It's so obvious. It's blatant. No collusion. How could this happen? You know what that reaction reminds me of is the 2016 election, where it was Hillary's going to win. There's no doubt about it. It's in the bag. We're going to have the first woman president. There's no way Trump can win this election. He's all of these horrible things. How did this happen? I mean, it was almost the exact same reaction. Any Republican or conservative minded person, and even most libertarians, would have accepted the findings of evidence of collusion had Mueller found any. There's no question that that would have been the case. Why is it so hard for this guy, Mueller, that the media praised and looked forward to and talked up and looked at as the the leader to the way of impeachment of a president? Why is it so hard for them to accept his findings whenever he said no collusion? They don't accept that. They want to say that they did great reporting, that that these were legitimate questions, and really what it comes down to is it was all a bunch of accusations for the longest time. And Republicans were told, you need to hold your tongue and wait. And a lot of those Republicans and conservatives were told by other Republicans and conservatives, let's wait for the report to finish. And there was rumors that Trump was going to fire Mueller, and I'm sure it crossed his mind at least a time or two. But you know what? He didn't. He didn't fire it. And the note was, Mueller wasn't allowed to do anything that he didn't want to do. He was given freedom to do every request he had to investigate as thoroughly as possible. And it drug out and drug out and drug out and drug out and drug out. And frankly, I was surprised that it came out so early, because I thought it was going to come out closer to uh, at least after the end of the Democratic primaries, probably closer to the general election, presidential debates, possibly an October surprise. That's kind of where my mind was on that. But I was wrong, and I might have jumped the gun on a couple of conclusions myself, preconceptions and notions, and I shouldn't do that. I try to tell people not to do that, but nobody's perfect. Everybody falls into that from time to time. I'm definitely gonna say I'm guilty of that, but you know, um, the thing that they're holding on to now is that there was this mention that he wasn't fully exonerated of obstruction, and they want to sit there and try to nail that home. But the reality is there wasn't enough there to say that the president obstructed justice at all. So he didn't collude with Russia. Even if you might have ifs or doubts about it, there's not enough there to get him on obstruction of justice. So how are you going to proceed to impeach? Because we know that that's the Democrat game plan. That's pretty much uh, what they've had in mind since day one. Most presidents get a honeymoon period, not this president. They have been gunning after him forever, and they're going to keep gunning after him, and it's not going to get any better. Leads me to my next point. Jussie Smollett. Man, I thought that this was pretty much a done deal. I know I had gotten into a pretty good falling out over jumping the gun reporting on it, over making assumptions, and the Chicago PD is not happy about this, and rightfully so, honestly. There's a big difference between what happened with the prosecution making a deal to seal the files for this case and Jussie Smollett being able to go free with, at this point, you still have to say allegedly committing uh, a hoax, false police report, and so on and so forth. There's a big difference between claiming exoneration and innocence with that, when people will just eat it up. That is not what happened there. And the comparison between what happened with Justice Smollett and what happened with Trump in the Mueller report is like night and day. Mueller report cleared the notion that the Trump campaign had anything to do with Russia collusion. It's been a fallacy, it's been false, and there's nothing there that you can get him on obstruction of justice for. It's just not there. You got nothing to hold on to it. That is transparency and being clear. The process was able to go through. The Jussie Smollett situation, no. There is reason to believe that there were some corruption factors playing into how that played out. And now that the FBI is reviewing those circumstances, I have a feeling this story isn't over yet. So, we'll see how that goes. Um, he wasn't cleared. Even the prosecuting office still stated that they believed he was guilty. Jussie Smollett was guilty of committing this hoax of the 16 felony indictments handed down from a grand jury that was assembled for apparently no reason whatsoever. And the news wants to say that there were problems with the investigation and the police protocol. There shouldn't have been an investigation in the first place. So that's point one. Uh, the taxpayers had to pay for that lengthy investigation. That's point two. To sit there and say that Jussie Smollett did not want this to be a highly publicized thing, I would refute that claim by saying if that was the case, why did he feel the need to post it on social media, make sure that everybody could get a grab of it, and do an interview on Good Morning America when the story started falling apart? You got to give it. The guy's got some big mitzvah to still maintain his innocence with a mountain of evidence, which is probably the biggest thing to point out when you're comparing the Muller situation with the Smollett situation. There was no evidence to be found of Russia collusion, and they went at it for almost 2 years. Found nothing of Russia collusion concerning the 2016 campaign. Period. Completely legitimizes the election of Donald J. Trump. End of discussion. There is evidence that we will never see at this point because it has been sealed and essentially expunged. So let's understand this. We hear all this about privilege, white privilege, and you were born privileged. There are two things I'm going to say. There is one privilege of being an American in this country. Because I don't care what your gender is, what your race is, what your age is, what your sexual preference is, what your religion is. If you work hard and you put your mind at something, you can succeed in this country, period. The 1% is not closed to a small group of people. Anybody can work hard enough, have a good break doing the work that they do because they are good at what they do, and get into that club. The door is open to all comers, just like anything else. And there are people from the 1% that can fall out of the 1% for making bad decisions. It happens all the time. That's the beauty of our capitalist system. There is a certain level of fluidity there that allows that type of equality to be there. If you want income equality, you are going to take away the freedom of people to be innovative, to be entrepreneurial, to be motivated, to strive for more, because there will never be more if there is this utopian everybody makes the same. It's just basic. But Jussie Smollett has an intersectional advantage when it comes to the liberal agenda, because we need to be clear as where there are times where we can have discussions in opposition. The way things have gone lately, that is much harder to do, and a lot of it has to do with if you disagree with what the leftists are telling you to believe, then you are wrong and you are getting false information, and all of your sources are unreliable, and all of your commentators are biased, and all of your research and time spent is for naught because you are not woke enough. that you have to be short-sighted and be a racist or a misogynist, or you can't possibly understand it because you're a white male in America and you just don't understand, this, that, and the other thing. All that stuff is malarkey. It's a bunch of nonsense. So intersectionality allows victimhood to be a currency. And for Jussie Smollett, the fact that he is part of the LGBT, so on and so forth community, it's like QQIAT 2 plus or something. It's just on and on and on. That, I mean, that's not to speak ill of the LGBT community. It is what it is. Um, not only is he part of that, but he's also part of a minority group, um, and he happens to be uh, an actor on this show that I guess has been going on for some years now. Uh, so he's made a good clip of money from that. So I guess you could say by all rights he's famous. He's definitely famous now. Um, so it is true that with wealth comes some privileges, but it just so happens if you live in one of the most corrupt cities in the country and you claim victimhood because you can orchestrate some attack in order to defame not just the president but anybody who supports him, and an alleged act to make all of that look bad, to play the victim in a situation, and utilize some pretty significant symbolism, with the rope and the the claim of this is MAGA country and one of the most liberal cities in the country. The story seemed far fetched on its face, and I don't want to delve into conspiracy because I want all the facts to come in, especially with the FBI review of the circumstances. But I do want to point out a couple of things. It is not a secret that the Smollett had ties to the Obama family, and I'm not even going to connect the fact that he was the president. I'm going to say that that's significant because he was a representative of Illinois and he knew how the Chicago machine works. So it makes sense that if you have ties to that family, that they are going to be able to call in some favors. I don't know if that's what happened. It does seem very possible that something along those lines is probably going to come to light. I know that that story is still evolving. I don't think we've seen the end of this. So I want to be clear about this idea that Jussie Smollett has been exonerated and is not guilty. He has the presumption of innocence, and that's about as far as it goes. But there is plenty of evidence that speaks to the contrary. And I hate to break it to you, but if the FBI investigation concerning the circumstances around the decision to drop all of the charges, if you drop all the charges, that doesn't mean you're innocent. That's not what that means. And apparently, a grand jury was assembled that felt like the evidence was enough, credible enough, and legitimate enough to indict him with 16 felony offenses. Apparently, there was new evidence that was going to be coming up in that trial. He pushed it, pushed it. It seems like he got as close to the line as he could get, and then panicked and called in some favors, and his sentence was lenient. If he was innocent, why didn't he fight for it to get his uh, bail money back? I mean, if you're innocent, you want that money back, right? That's $10,000. I don't care who you are, how much or how little money you have. If I'm innocent, there's no way I'm gonna just say here's a charitable gift. I'm gonna make a deal that says you can just go ahead and keep that. No sensible person would do that. On top of that, he was sentenced to 2 days of community service, which he had already served. So he didn't have to do anything. He got not. I mean, that's it. Wasted taxpayer money, policeman hours, where they could have been working on actually legitimate investigations where real crimes were occurring, where there were real victims involved. But he has to be given the presumption of innocence. I'm not saying that that shouldn't be the case. He should get the presumption of innocence. But to sit there and say that things worked out the way they should have, if things worked out the way they should have, if he was really innocent, it could have played out in court and he would have been found innocent. That's not what happened. They couldn't bring it to court. Almost 2 years to find out that there was no collusion after the media went on and on and on about it. We can't believe Mueller's report. Several weeks of highly publicized claims that were inflammatory to begin with evidence that pointed to the direction that it was a hoax all along. The charges dropped, cases sealed, and that's supposed to be an exoneration. Why am I supposed to buy this logic? This is ridiculous. We know that Trump did not collude with Russia for the 2016 campaign. We know it for a fact. We do not know for a fact that Jussie Smollett is innocent. He has a presumption of innocence, but it looks very much based off of evidence and not any kind of opinion based on what your social currency is. Evidence points to the fact, based off of Chicago Police Department's investigation, that he facilitated the attack on himself, that he conspired to orchestrate a hoax, and that he did it intentionally. I try to put faith in the judicial system because I think it is the most just and fair system that we have, but that by no means it's perfect. It's much better than many judicial systems across the globe. But I can see how something like this would cause people to lose faith in the judicial system. The laws are supposed to apply to everyone equally, regardless of your race, regardless of your religion, and regardless of your wealth. That does not seem to be the case here. There definitely seems to be a sense of privilege in this situation. I would have been more than willing to hear Justice Smollett's arguments, his defense over the claims against him, and give him the presumption of innocence all the way through the process until the verdict came down. But because it was a bad week for Democrats, I guess, he basically gets a pass because he just happened to be in the right city that could have enough corruption in it, which is no secret, by the way. I mean, there's been corruption in Chicago since before Al Capone and the outfit. It's just a disservice to the city of Chicago, and it's a disservice to the American people. It sends out the message that if you know the right people and you have enough money, that you can get away with pretty much whatever you want. The privilege of having enough check marks in the societal victimhood boxes, and the privilege of being part of a industry that creates nothing but an echo chamber of like-minded thespians that can get away with whatever they want because they are given so much money in their contracts. I really feel like that is the big down note of this week. The last thing I'm going to point out, there was a vote on the Green Deal in the Senate, and everybody's trying to make McConnell be the big bad guy on this one for pulling a political trick. It should have gone to committees. It should have been this, that, and the other thing. I'm gonna break it down real simple. Since the new Green Deal came out, almost every prospective Democratic candidate claimed that they would support this bill. They wanted it passed. Almost everybody on the Democratic side talked about how ambitious, how revolutionary, how forethoughtful this bill was, what kind of good it was going to do for the country. If you believe in it so much, why not vote for it? Well, then they want to blame the president would have never signed it. So what are we supposed to do? Wait until after this election to hopefully get a Democratic president? And what if that doesn't work out? We're supposed to just hold on to it and let it stand in committee indefinitely until you do get a Democratic president and you think is going to sign it? That doesn't seem proper for the way that our system works, especially considering that the world's supposed to be ending in 12 years if we don't make these changes. I hate to break it to you, but the way things are going, I don't think the Democratic candidates have a chance. If you're going to want the presidency, you're going to have to do better than what you've been doing because your ideas don't work, your arguments are weak, you're playing to a pandering crowd that changes its mind on a second to second basis. And you can't get people on the claims that you're making them on national television. You're falling all over yourselves left and right. And then you want everybody to be force fed your crap and say, this tastes delicious, and I am completely in agreement with you. Sorry, not going to happen in this case. Not going to be doing it. I think you're going to lose in 2020. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with this video, and that's fine, but I suggest you come up with some pretty good arguments to contend with anything you disagree with what I said in this video, because that's pretty much the way this is playing out. And be careful when you go after the Smollett situation, because, like I said, it is the circumstances of that case surrounding those attorneys and that office are under FBI review, which could quickly turn into an investigation. And if that happens, you might be looking at charges going from a state level to a federal level. So maybe slow walk this one before we jump to conclusions on guilt or innocence. And take note that I said that he has been granted the presumption of innocence throughout this whole video. I need evidence to say that he is, because I ain't seen it, guys. But we'll see how it plays out. Right now, it looks like nothing's going to happen. And that just seems suspicious and fishy. And I don't think that's an unreasonable thing to say. So it's not racist, it's not bigoted, it's not anti-LGBT community. It's just based on fact. It looks bad. That's pretty much all I got for right now. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more fun things to talk about in short order. So until then, thanks for listening to me.